Welcome to Positive Perspectives, a podcast dedicated to sharing powerful stories that presents opportunities to grow from lived experiences. Each week we speak to expert guests who bring thought-provoking topics, meaningful lessons, or stories that spark transformation and deeper understanding. Today I'm speaking to Nikki Tapper, MBE, a former mainstream teacher who discovered her true calling when working with young people who struggle to thrive in traditional educational settings. Nikki is a radio presenter, broadcasting programs on BBC local radio stations, and previously presenting the Gospel Lounge with Nikki Tapper, the Sunday Nights with Nikki Tapper, and currently she's an ambassador for the National Apprentice and Educational Events. Welcome, Nikki. Welcome to Positive Perspectives.
Thank you, Marie. A real pleasure to do this and be your guest on this. And it's a joy because you have my middle name as well.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I know. Learn something new every day. Yeah, so my full name is Nicolette Marie.
Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're going to be sharing?
Okay, so honey, Nikki again came about because nobody could fully pronounce or at least say my full name in a way that made me feel comfortable, and they change it and all sorts. And I just said, you know what, just call me Nikki. So I'm born and bred in Birmingham in the West Midlands. Officially, I should say I'm born in Smethwick, which is just outside the main city, you could say, of Birmingham. Grew up in West Brom, became a young woman who loved to perform. And so my late parents, especially my mom, made sure that I joined the Brownies, the Girl Guides, that I did ballet and acrobatics at Joan Hipkiss School of Dance. And I suppose the gifting around being in front of an audience was probably put in from there. I wasn't aware of that at that time. And I just enjoyed helping people laugh and making people laugh. And so then when I went on to secondary school, that kind of followed with me. I learned to play the trombone. So I think the creative arts was always going to be part of my journey. And what I enjoyed, I suppose, about school is that I was a bit of a joker because I didn't have I'd say, the features that one would want when you're around 13, 14. As a young girl, I was always quite tomboyish, may not be the phrase that we would use now, but I loved sports. I loved playing football, netball, and I found that I was good at making people laugh or making them feel comfortable to be in my space. And I don't really enjoy confrontation, so I was always the one who tried to ease a situation with a bit of a joke or a laugh as I was going through school. But then I think the journey of me becoming a teacher and going into radio came about more in my mid-20s. I did thankfully, yes, I went to uni, actually studied an H&D, then went on to do a degree in business and thought I was going to be some next Lord Alan Sugar and rule the world when it came to entrepreneurship or making money in that way. And I also love languages. I did French and Spanish at A levels, but my parents were fortunately divorced at the time and I just flunked them terribly. But that wasn't the case. I think the business studies wasn't really for me. I struggled with end of year or end of term exams. And thankfully then finding courses that had presentations in there and the opportunity to talk was much more my skill set and much more comfortable for me to be in. And I even remember an old school report from a teacher that said, Nicolette is a talkative child. So obviously talking was going to be part of the repertoire. So when I did the degree and so on and realised actually I wasn't going to be the next Lord Alan Sugar, my faith became very important to me. So spiritually I was I'd always been brought up around church and sent to Sunday school, but I'd made the commitment to accept the Lord as my saviour when I was probably more so in my late teens, early 20s, where it became much more apparent that that's what would give me a foundation that I could stand on and I felt secure in. Not that I was this perfect person around that, but I really understood what it meant for me to believe in God, and that for me, he was almighty and he knew all things and he had a plan for me, and I just needed to follow it at times, not always well, and still now probably not. And I'm sure sometimes he's looking down going, my gosh, what is going on with my child? However, that, as I said, became a part, and I started to help out in Sunday school, and then I was told about helping out in the Saturday school, which for Black British Caribbean communities was a real strong thing in the 90s, because there was a lot of concern around mainstream education not really coming alongside Black British young people, in particular boys. And I felt that was just at least one way to help them feel comfortable around the basics of English and maths. And that, I suppose, triggered the thought of, oh, education, and I could probably do that. And bizarrely, I went and looked at an old careers reports. Remember when you went to school and you had your careers and your options, and all of them actually had teaching from nursery up to university level. So it was obviously something there, and I was really pleased that I did, and finished the degree, had a year out, and then went back and did a postgraduate certificate in education in business studies. And that was really the beginning of the journey of teaching and the career around teaching for me.
So it's really about talking about identifying differences and working with them and how you can actually redefine them and make it quite a success story, really.
And I think that I found definitely within teaching, coming us, across young people. Secondary school was where I mean, I started in further education. So I was a lecturer at local college for around 5 years. So I've always probably enjoyed the older young people, and more so those who are going into year 10 onwards, that I enjoy. So they would be from the age of 14 to 18. Because we could have the conversations. They had probably better emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, and you could at least feel as though you were imparting something, even if it was a nugget of hope, a nugget of support, a nugget of truth in their lives, that they would run with it. And I think teaching is still probably the only profession where everybody remembers a good or poor teacher that they had. And I found that I wanted young people to be celebrated, wanted their differences to be celebrated, but realized we were still in a world that said, mainstream said, you need to operate in this particular way. We want you to fit in this box, and that's the box that you need to stay in. If you fell outside of that box, we weren't too sure what we were going to do with you. So my teaching career led me to move on from college, go into mainstream school. But I found that I was much more attracted to hearing the stories of my young people and the students I was working with, and found that a lot of them had a lot of issues. They had to deal with what we could say now, adverse childhood experiences. They were around, unfortunately, adults that weren't looking after them, were neglecting them, whether it be emotionally, that they were unfortunately being subjected to a lot of abuse. And I wanted to do more to help those who were receiving that type of support, for want of a better word, that they were in those circumstances and they were falling outside of the box. So they were either quite aggressive and their behavior, that was shouting, getting into fights, or they were so quiet and recluse that they actually dropped out of mainstream school. And only after a while you may hear us kind of go, oh, I haven't seen Johnny for ages. What's happened to Johnny? So when I moved away from mainstream, I ended up working for alternative education provision. Really, it was a small team of us as teachers who would work more on a one-to-one basis or one-to-small group basis of up to probably about 9, 10 young people, and built trust and ease with them. And they were the ones who you could say were called emotionally based at school refusers. They were the ones who just struggled being in school, the noise levels, the amount of young people, the change of the timetables. You've got to leave from block A to get over to block C to do French, and then get back to block D to do science. And when we put young people in those situations, especially at the age of 11, 12, we're expecting them to navigate things that even as adults we would navigate. You'd have somebody to come alongside you and say, right, you've got a period of 2-3 months to blend in, get used to a system. Yes, we may give young people in year 6, and they'll probably be 10, 11 when they're about to start secondary school in September, but it's still a short window of time. And you're expecting sometimes young people who've had one teacher for 5 years of their lives at the same environment. They know the routine. to then transfer to a school that may have 1,000 young people with different teachers for different subjects, having to navigate personalities, characters that they're like, that's a bit alien to me. How do I navigate that? Leaving school where they're loved and probably going into a secondary school where they've got to show love and build relationships. And that's really difficult for them to navigate. And they probably get through the first 2 years of secondary school and hit a wall around 13, 14. Hormonally, they're changing. Personalities are changing. The girls think they're women, the boys think they're men, and they want to be children again. And school just doesn't work for them. And we thankfully were seconded to do this work of coming alongside those young people that just couldn't navigate mainstream. It wasn't because they weren't able in terms of academically able, personality wise, they just couldn't cope. We were beginning to be more aware of learning needs of young people being autistic or being on the spectrum or having other neurodiverse needs, other learning needs that were hindering them being in that setting in a mainstream school, sitting alongside another 26, up to 30 young people in a classroom and not able to voice how they feel in a way that would make them feel safe. And even the young people that were aggressive and much more demonstrative with their behavior would disrupt a lesson to get the attention from the teacher was really, again, doing another way of crying out. I need to be heard. I need someone to listen to me. Something in my brain, in my emotional psyche isn't working. We didn't have the time, we didn't have the resources in mainstream. And I'd still say a lot of schools probably struggle to do that now, especially, post-COVID, that brought in a shift that made, that highlighted a lot, again, emotional trauma that many people are dealing with. And even in the workplace, as from a business standpoint, it brought things up. So I'm still really keen that we work with and help demonstrate to adults, to significant people, whether it be in business or in education, that we need to have young people or have people's needs at the forefront. I think if we can come alongside someone and help them develop resilience, build that trust, build that ease, give them the opportunity to talk or just not talk and be listened to, then it is a help. And I'm pleased that at least I had the opportunity through that way of working with young people that came about. And I could see a difference being made with my colleagues and myself. Yes.
What are some of the key things that you think people can look out for, say in the workplace, or just for young people, just to kind of understand that there may be an opportunity to support?
I suppose there's many things that one could look out for, but I think if you notice that somebody's become either quite quiet, they're not as talkative as they have been, they're struggling in presentation settings. They are, you notice that as soon as a PowerPoint presentation comes on, those dreaded PowerPoints at times, that they get up and go for a walk. They need to leave the space. They're not as comfortable to share their thoughts. They're right. Oh, I've just got to go to the loo. As an adult, you're more likely to do that because you have the freedom. In a school setting or a college setting, the chance of them feeling comfortable to do that is slimmer because you've got to be in that space for learning. But even in the workplace, you may notice a colleague who seems to always disappear and they don't smoke, but they need to be out of that environment. They don't feel comfortable sharing an opinion. Those are the signs. And even the opposite, they may have become much more gregarious and loud, and they're always seeming to have to disagree with the points that, you say the world's green. Well, no, it's not. It's black. Look at this. And you're like, oh, that's a little bit. So those are, I would say, are things where, especially whether it be a colleague or even in a managerial position, that you should say, let's go for a coffee and let's talk and see if you can hear them and whether they need additional support or whether they just need you to listen. Because sometimes they're ready, we've got to get this program in place, we've got to get them on that program, and we've got to get them, and they may not even need that. They may just need you genuinely to just listen to them. And they can at least know that somebody's heard them. They may not have all the answers. And again, we sometimes do, even as a teacher, I've got to be the solution problem solver and I've got to find it. And sometimes you may not be able to solve the problem. But once that person knows they've got trust, that you've built them, you've made them feel comfortable, you've encouraged them. You've said, well, look, at least I know that if you come to me, we'll have a cup of coffee and we can just sit in silence.
Yeah.
Those are the things I think can be really helpful. But look, it's wanting to look out for the needs of others, and not in a saintly way. And go to your workplaces, be in education or be in spaces where there are other people, and just say, I'll be there, and I'll gently look out for some things, because you won't change everyone. If you can make a difference to someone over a period of time, then it's better than not doing it at all. And that help is a legacy that could carry on through that person, through others. And I think that's really a major thing that we need to look at. How do we just have a legacy of love for somebody else other than ourselves?
Creating safe and supportive spaces. And that's interesting that everyone can get involved. And as you were saying, it's simple listening is a good place to start, because that may be the key or the stepping stone to what someone may need at that point.
Exactly.
And are there any examples that you can tell us about the practices that you've used or a journey that you've been on to support someone?
I haven't obviously even mentioned a little bit about my radio career, and that's, again, running alongside teaching meant that I was still around people. So I know that I've come across and worked with colleagues where I've been an encouraging ear. But I think with the teaching, one story that stands out for me is when I worked with a young lady called Sarah who was selective mute and she wouldn't speak. And it was the irony of putting somebody like me who loves to talk and is always talking, and probably would have struggled to think, oh, when you have a period of silence and no one's saying anything, that's a bit awkward because, I've got to fill the gap. But when I was given Sarah to work with, she was in her last year. So she was about 15, 16, last year of secondary school, or last 2 years, so year 10. So she was coming into the last 2 years of secondary school, had already had not very great experiences of being in mainstream, and was diagnosed and was on the spectrum, but was selective in how she spoke and what she was going to say and who she was going to say that with. And I was so, at first, a little bit nervous about how am I going to work with somebody who doesn't really want to talk. What strategies am I going to use to help this situation and help me? And I think what I loved about that period of my teaching career was you didn't go in there as you approach mainstream. Mainstream, you've got your lesson prepped, you've got your lesson plan, and you're saying to the students, right, by the end of this session, we're going to do A, B, C, D, and you will have met my objectives. When you're working in this situation with a young person, in a way, an agenda goes out the window. Your main objective is that you at least leave the session positively. You may not have done any work at all. And that was still what was so alien to colleagues and how mainstream teaching works, because you've got to have an outcome, and that outcome must be tangible. But sometimes it wasn't with these young people I worked with, and Sarah, it definitely wasn't tangible in those first few months. It was just about building relationships. And I loved music. Thankfully, she loved music, but I would be asking her, what do you want to hear? And she loved a lot of Japanese music. She was into anime, going to these the cos competitions or exhibitions, and Mum would take her to those where you dress up in cartoon characters. Totally alien to me. I'm a church going Black British Jamaican, and loves my soul, loves my reggae. And that wasn't what I would want to do. But I realized that that's the joy of coming alongside people. You are wanting to hear their interests and appreciate the differences and see that there's not a problem with that. It's not your thing, but you can appreciate that you can find something in it that you can appreciate. So thankfully I could appreciate Japanese music. I could appreciate the way that she liked using art to express her feelings, and drawing. And I would find those examples of the scheme of work that we did use was, okay, so let's look at drawing and let's look at being practical and hands-on. And and much more kinesthetic in a sense in our approach of how we wanted to work. And I loved the fact that over those 2 years, where one would say in terms of academically, there wasn't great progress. That's, because that's what education was all about. We need to see the results. We need to get the GCSEs. But it was more about actually the progress was this young lady that would choose when she wanted to speak, or at least sometimes just struggled to speak, began to feel more comfortable when by the time we finished our time together. If I rang and spoke to her parents and she'd come on and she'd say hello and she would speak. And that stepping stone and that work was such a rewarding period in my life, that to hear that she went on to university, she went to Japan, she's traveled, she's getting work, she's become a productive person in our society with her differences. I just thought, wow, thank you for the opportunity. For me, thank you, Lord, for the opportunity and giving me the gifting of seeing that and recognizing that actually, if anything, differences can be celebrated, should be celebrated, because they work. If we as a society allowed for that and not kept saying to people, well, you've got to fit in that box. Yes, there's particular laws, we know that, and there's things that we all have to adhere to. But our personalities and the characters that we've been given, that's what we need to be able to celebrate and bring out in a positive way, that that person who is different to you can still work and still be productive and adds to your life, not take away.
Thank you for that. So there were some really key elements that can be drawn out of that in terms of how do you support somebody who is probably not in the kind of mainstream norm, who doesn't fit into, say, a round circle, a square person into a round, circle. How do we actually look at that, and how do we support people? And what's quite interesting what you were saying is that it's going to the individual. It's seeing what their interests are. It's seeing where you might ignite that conversation, where you can come alongside them to start to develop a relationship and then support them going forward to realize that there is some interest, there are things that they could do. So that's a real confidence kind of booster for them as well.
Really, as with all of us, we are in need of building resilience. But you don't have to build the resilience with the classic kind of stereotype. Well, just pull up your bootstraps. The late Norman Tebbit said, get on your bike. That may have worked and can work for some. But what we're realizing is that actually that's not the message that suits all.
Yeah.
And I think through my time in education, and even now as I still train and facilitate and work with young people as well as young adults, that I want to help you build resilience, because life is hard. There are hurdles that you will come across and you'll fall over, but you do need to have a way of knowing how to pick yourself back up and move again. And, I have that picture of the 800 meter hurdle race, or is it 400 meters, where you're running and every 200 meters you've got to jump a hurdle.
Yeah.
Life is great and smooth. And oh no, I've got something else. And I think if we can help build resilience in working colleagues, friends, family members, young people, students, whoever we come across, really, to say, yes, life will be, but this is how I can help pick you up. And it may be, we're going to have a conversation. Let's go for a coffee. Let me hear how you're feeling. Let me mirror, a response to you. Mirror, this is what I'm hearing you say, and give them, oh, okay. So that tells them you're listening. I have to be probably a little bit more blunt and say, okay, let's set a target and let's get this done. But I think if they can see that they are believed and trusted, and that I want to celebrate that difference, and I will help navigate with you or with someone to say, this is how you can get through a work life, or you can get through societal norms, then I feel as though, I'm making a difference. I've helped them see life. And even as I said earlier, if it's just one nugget of truth, I remember I used to say to another student that you need to stare in the mirror and tell yourself that I am blessed, I'm beautiful, there is no one else like me. And it was for a lot of us as British people or British born, and Caribbean, and the stoic kind of Englishness that we've have, stiff upper lip. We don't do things like that. We don't need to. Actually, no, we do need to be able to celebrate ourselves, as well as being celebrated by others. But if we can believe in ourselves and see it and have somebody help mirror that and share it, then I just think it takes you into another direction, leaps and bounds. As I say this, Marie, I'm talking to myself to remind myself that's what you're able to do, Nikki. You are able. There isn't another one. There isn't another Marie Loney. There's not another Nikki Tapper.
Yeah.
And that's to be celebrated every time you get that sense of, "Oh, I'm not really worth that much." No, remember who you are and remember what that teacher told you, or a friend told you, or the work colleague whispered in your ear about how wonderful you are. I think those things edify, uplift, inspire, and build the resilience to keep going.
You were talking around that. I did actually think to myself, those words of affirmation can be really powerful when you really mean it. And when you really look at yourself and say those words to yourself, what that might be. Even in your day to day, there may be a situation where you feel, gosh, you've just walked into the office, this thing happened was negative, that thing happened that was negative. And before you even sit at your desk, you're already kind of like glass half empty. And it's how do you then put some more energy and positive energy so that you can go through your day. And affirmations can be one of those, routes to doing that. As well as you also said about celebration. Celebration is really important. We go from day to day, task to task, and we don't celebrate that we've actually achieved something. And that's really important to just pat yourself on the back. Yeah.
No, I was just saying because I've been on this journey with having a total knee replacement in these last few months, and again that challenge of really celebrating. Gosh, that's another day of healing. You're walking a little bit better today. That's great, Nikki. Rather than gosh, I thought I'd be further on by now, and it is a battle, but it still can be a journey and a joyful battle of when, as you rightly said, you hear yourself going, "Oh well, come through the door." So, how was your weekend? Oh, it was awful. I've had a terrible weekend. And oh God, you see, the coffee machine's not working now, and you not wanting to absorb that, but then either reflecting or deflecting that, sorry, by saying to the person, "But don't worry, someone's coming to fix it."
Yeah.
And you know what? Actually, shall I go and get you a coffee? It's how you can, as you rightly said, change the narrative so that you're hearing yourself speak positively and coming against that, I'd say, negative spiritual energy of, well, you see, well, I told you, you see, as soon as you see Mary, that's it, it's all over, you
Mm.
know. But you can either, again, little things of walking through that door, going to whether it be even to your house, to your workplace, and go, today's going to be a good day. And whatever has happened, I'm not bringing in with me today. And, and simple thing, as you said, or as we know, smile. You just have to choose to tell yourself, I'm going to smile. I'm going to remind myself of what I did on Saturday. And when somebody said, "Oh, I love your hair,"
Mm.
or "I like your glasses," or, "Oh, that dinner was lovely, what you cooked." Remind yourself of those as you're going to the next situation. Because when the hurdle comes up out of nowhere, or, or a storm, another battle to be fought, when I'm reminded that I have been given the strength to deal with it, whatever that problem is, whatever it looks, whether it's a horrible word from somebody, and we are human, of course, you will have a natural reaction. But when you remind yourself that actually that's not my baggage, that's theirs, and I've actually got the strength, and I'll use wisdom about whether I speak or whether I say anything or whether I do. Actually, I understand that you're upset, but that's not my baggage. I'm not going to take that on. Those are where you realize, gosh, I'm building a strength here. I'm building a confidence. I'm building a resilience.
Mm.
And I'm just so pleased that I instilled some of that in the young people that I worked with. And even now, thankfully with the friendship groups that you have, and you want to be around people that are encouraging and uplifting and sharing life with you, but also bringing you up, because you also realize and recognize I want to bring you up, because we don't want to get swamped by life circumstances. Because there's always joy. There's always a lovely, as you've seen, we may see the rain, but when the sun comes out, how joyful does that feel?
Thank you for that, Nikki. When you were talking, I was thinking about let's reframe the narrative, our narrative, and let's almost take control of our spaces, because we can control those spaces. When you were talking about somebody saying something negative and having the wisdom to discern that that's not mine, that's your baggage, you can keep it, I'm not going to make it mine. That's really powerful, because we're bombarded by so many images, so much information can give us some sublime messages that can take us somewhere in a negative space where we don't need to be. And we kind of think to ourselves, how did we end up here, when we just started to look on Instagram, or we just started to look on Facebook, or we just read this, or we just read that, or we saw this, image of something that triggered something within us. We can control that.
We can control it. However, I think again, we can control it, but you can also ask for help to control it.
Yeah.
Again, I'd have to say that for me, I'd have to recognize that, look, I've been made and created for a purpose, and I believe that purpose means that I've got to get the help to get out of it. So I'm able to do it, but I'm also being given the tools, whether it be with another person or with the literature or the materials that I choose to read, to move myself differently and move out of that. So I would, for me, it would be, I'd be praying, I'd take time to meditate, I'd take time to hear what who I believe the Lord's saying, this isn't right, this is something different. And listen to be saying, well, who could I speak to? Who's going to come alongside me to give me the support to come out the other side? Because no man is an island. Genuinely, no man is an island. We weren't created to be solitary individuals to sort it all out on our own, because we do need to be able to come alongside and recognize, I can't do this on my own. I need the help, and then I will be able to navigate some of it on my own. So for argument's sake, seeking therapy, seeking counseling, coming around somebody who you think has got wisdom and wise counsel, says, well, when I had that experience, this is how I came out the other side.
Yeah.
And that is possibly what it is that you could seek to help you. And then you've got the confidence to pass that on to somebody else, to say, this is how I came out of a circumstance, a situation. You have got the tools in which to do it. But if the two of you or the three of you can come together, there's a power in that. There's in fact a scripture that talks about, where two or three are gathered, he's in the midst. There's a strength that comes when you can unite and choose to talk positively and choose to come against a negative energy, a negative spirit, in a way that means you're all edified and you come away still celebrating your individualness, still celebrating the character and the personality that you have, but you've not solely done it on your own.
How they can maybe reframe somebody's experience from the ground up.
Yeah.
What would
I
that
think
be?
that's a real key word there, Marie, to help reframe, to help look, choose to look at the circumstances differently. Accept the fact that we are at a time when people's differences can be celebrated. So for me, it would be looking at work colleagues, young people, whatever space you find yourself in, especially, when you're around others, that you're noticing that they don't seem comfortable in themselves as they may have been, or they are coming in consistently and continually with a negative energy that brings everybody down. It would be, it would just be you saying, actually, I'm going to come alongside them. I am going to ask them, what's happening for you? How can I help? Do you want me to have, let's go for a tea or coffee? It doesn't mean that's going to solve it. And it may mean that you get kickback. But if you really believe that there's something going on, help that person see you as somebody that they can trust, somebody that they can build ease with, somebody that's looking to help make them feel more comfortable in the work setting or in a school setting. Younger people may not have the emotional literacy, they may not have that emotional intelligence. So you can help guide them through it. That's what we should be doing as teachers or instructors, even as parents, guardians. We are saying to them, okay, so this is what I'm hearing you say. So tell me again, and help choose to think, what's the language that I can use that will make them feel as though they are being listened to. You're not talking down to them. Think about body posture. How do you talk to someone? When you've gone to talk to a colleague at their desk, you standing over them while they're sitting down going, oh, I thought you'd have got that task finished by now. What's going on with you? Automatically, they put up a defense. We put up our walls.
Yeah.
Kneel and give them eye level and be at their level and let them see your eyes. Let them see that there's a genuineness in what you're trying to communicate, because, we know that how a message is transmitted isn't necessarily how it's received. It's not always, it doesn't land well. So I would encourage any of us who are working with young people, working with in a team, managing a team, a colleague in a team, look out for signs that you could come alongside somebody and help them feel as though they are welcomed, they are loved, their differences are celebrated. Yeah, as I said with Sarah, I could have easily gone, well, if you don't talk to me by tomorrow, that's it, I'm out. But I worked with that difference, and that difference has made that young person become a young adult and still navigate this life.
Yeah.
And navigate some of it well, I'm sure, and some of it not so well. But she's still chosen to work in a world that says, actually, I love my difference. I want to celebrate my difference. And I will choose to work with that. And we, as individuals that may demonstrate what's deemed to be the norm, actually, we've all got a neurodiverse in us. And so, therefore, come alongside the differences, celebrate that, let them feel as though they can contribute, because they can. We all can contribute to the society. We just need to want to do that and want to take the time to do it.
Yeah. If you were to give our viewers one takeaway, what takeaway might that be for today?
Oh, the takeaway I would give listeners, viewers, is come alongside someone and show them that you care. It doesn't take much. It's, as I've said before, it may be an offer of, going for a coffee. It may be just a simple smile. And if you choose to do that every day, even if it looks as though the person you're smiling at isn't responding, I just know, and I've seen enough evidence to say, once you choose to show the love, practice kindness, it does come back to you. And I think that's the takeaway. Choose to show love, show kindness.
Yeah. And there's a perseverance in that as well. As you were saying, you might have to be smiling at first until there is a trust or a communication starts. Or you just might be showing something in service. So getting a cup of tea or coffee if they need to, if they're working really hard, or just even checking in with somebody just to see how are you doing. I know it's a big project that we're on right now. How are you doing? Do you need to get up and take a break? We could just go for a walk and have the sun on our face or something like that. So yes, that's
Definitely. Or, as you said, even especially in the workplace,
yeah.
you know what? You need to finish early today. Just give them that, because it's so small, as you rightly said, service opportunities that can be open a plethora of love and joy, and the way that they come in and work, and they can see that place of work or the school or the college as a joyful place. There's at least one individual. I think, if anything, again, another small takeaway is you meet that one individual that everyone says, you can trust her, you can trust him.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Well, we've come to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much, Nikki, for being our guest today and sharing how important it is to recognise those vulnerabilities as a starting point rather than barriers, and how it can actually unlock potential in the most unexpected ways. Thank you, Nikki, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.